Yes, Mr. Freund.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chair, as you will be aware, the primary evidence to be led today, before we come to the evidence this evening of Mr. Mantashe to complete his evidence of last week, will be evidence from the Executive Authority of Parliament, which of course is a joint executive authority comprising the Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Modise, the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Mr. Masondo. They have prepared both a joint submission and a joint supplementary submission to deal with both houses. We propose to start with Ms. Modise, who presently is the Speaker, and later, probably only this afternoon, we will reach the evidence of Mr. Masondo. So, with your leave, I would wish to call Ms. Modise to testify, to be sworn in, and then we can do the formalities of placing the evidence on record.
Okay, all right. Before we do that, I just want to say to Ms. Modise and Mr. Masondo, and also to the public, when I approached them last year and indicated that I would wish Parliament to make a contribution by way of evidence, they had no hesitation in assuring me that they would be very glad to do that. They are not here because of anything. They are here because they believe they should assist the Commission. So I take this opportunity to thank you, Ms. Modise and Mr. Masondo, for your cooperation and for the fact that you are here to give support to the Commission and to make such contribution as you can to assist the Commission to make its contribution to the challenges that it is looking at. Thank you very much for coming and availing yourself. Thank you. Please administer the oath of affirmation.
Please state your full names for the record.
I am Thandi Modise.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
Not at all.
Do you consider the oath binding on your conscience?
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you very much.
Chair, you should have available to you bundle 6 of the parliamentary oversight bundle. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And Madam Speaker, you should have the same bundle with you?
Yes, I do.
Can I take you, please, to page 7?
Well, you have helped me, Mr. Freund, because I was about to ask Ms. Modise, because I wasn't sure. But I think you have given the indication. It's the fact that it's not in Parliament doesn't mean that we can't address her as Madam Speaker.
Ms. Modise will do fine.
Yeah, okay, all right. I just wasn't sure and I didn't want to. Okay, no, okay. Okay, all right, thank you.
I think in this venue I may, if I may refer to you as Ms. Modise. Ms. Modise, would you please turn to page 7 of bundle 6.
7? Yes. I have page 7.
And if you would keep your finger there and go through to page 36. In fact,
yes, I do have.
Yes, page 36. Is that the submission that you jointly, together with Mr. Masondo, prepared on the 25th of February of this year to submit to the Commission?
It is.
And if I can just take you to...
Okay, all right. May I ask you to just raise your voice so that it can be recorded properly. Or maybe you can bring the mic closer.
Yes, Chair, I'll bring the mic closer.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Is the lighting fine there? Can you see?
So far, it is fine,
Okay, all right.
Chairperson.
Okay, all right.
And if I can take you to paragraph 3 on page 9.
Paragraph 3.
You say there, the facts set out in this submission are true and correct. They are within the personal knowledge of the executive authority, unless stated or the context says otherwise, or have been obtained from documentation under the control of the executive authority, where the executive authority relies on information conveyed by others. The executive authority states the source of the information and believe such information to be true and correct. Now, I take it that's correct.
That is correct.
And I just draw your attention to the Chair that although that is stated, the format of this submission is not an affidavit, but nonetheless, Ms. Modise is testifying under oath and is confirming the content, and I will address the same with Mr. Masondo.
Yes, she, by confirming its correctness under oath, she gives it the same status as an affidavit.
Now, Ms. Modise, if you could just now go to page 37, you will see that is a list of the annexures to your original submission. Is that correct?
Page 37.
Headed annexures. You see that?
I think my bundle might be saying something else. Because my bundle on page 37 still deals with committee reports.
Okay, I think somebody will assist you.
Bringing the red one. Thank you.
Are you with me,
Yes,
Ms.
yes,
Modise?
yes.
Right.
That is so.
And you will see that there's a list of annexures,
From
A through to K.
J to K.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Now, if you keep your finger there at 37 and go all the way through, please, to 395. Well, let me stop at maybe 393.
Yes, to 393.
Right. And can you confirm that those are some of the annexures that you originally provided to the Commission?
I can confirm that,
And
Chairperson.
then if I take you to 394 and 395, can you confirm that you have also submitted electronically to the Commission many more pages that comprise annexures J and K, which have not been printed, but which are essentially Hansard extracts of debates of relevance to this Commission?
I can confirm that, Chair.
And then if I take you to page 397 through to 399, is it correct that the Commission addressed, in fact, through me, addressed a further letter to the Executive Authority in response to your original submission, asking for certain supplementary information, and we find the letter asking for that information at 397 to 399. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Then if I take you to 400, is it correct that that is the letter under cover of which you submitted for what I will call a supplementary submission?
That is correct.
And then if we go to 401 through to 407, is that the body of the supplementary submission? 401 to 407.
Yes.
And then if we go to 409 all the way through to the end, is it correct that those are some but not all of the further documentation that you furnished together with your supplementary submission.
I can confirm that.
Chair, against that background, I move that the submission, the annexures, the request for a supplementary submission, the supplementary submission, the annexures thereto, all collectively in volume 6 of the Parliamentary Oversight Bundle, be admitted as Exhibit ZZ15.
What's the exhibit number?
ZZ15, 15.
The submission by the Executive Authority of Parliament and the document indicated by the evidence leader that are attached to it will be admitted as Exhibit ZZ15, is that right?
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Modise, can I now ask you to turn back to page 9, please?
Page 9.
Page 9.
I have page 9.
And you say the following in paragraph 4 at page 9. You say, and this is you speaking collectively with Mr. Masondo. You with me? Page 9. Paragraph 4.
Paragraph 4, yes.
You say this. This submission provides a high-level summary of the role played by Parliament in executing its constitutional mandate prior and during investigations into allegations of state capture. I take it that is a summary of the purpose of this submission.
That is true.
Now, before we proceed any further, we have already introduced into the record that you serve as the Speaker of the National Assembly. But could you give the Chair just a very brief, as it were, biography of your political career, and in particular, insofar as it involves participation in the national legislature?
Thank you. Chairperson, I was amongst the first to be in the Democratic Parliament in 1994. I spent the first 10 years of my political life there. The first 2 as a member of the Joint Standing Committee and other committees. The 8 years that followed, I was both chairperson of the Joint Standing Committee on Defence and the Portfolio Committee on Defence, here and there serving in other portfolios and other committees of Parliament. I then went from 2004 to 2009 to the Northwest, my province, and served as the Provincial Legislature Speaker. In 2010, I was then requested by my party to go and become the Premier of the Northwest. That was from the end of 2010 up to 2014 when the elections came. From 2014 to 2019, I was the chairperson of the NCOP. And in the last elections, I was given the opportunity and the honor to become the Speaker of the National Assembly.
Thank you very much for that. Now, I want to take you just crisply through some introductory points. Can I take you to paragraph 9, please? On page 10.
Yes, sir.
And while you have your finger at page 9, I ask you to go to page 38.
I have page 38.
Thank you. Now, there's no need for us to go through Annexure A in any detail, It speaks for itself. You've sought to identify provisions in the Constitution that bear on the constitutional role of both the National Assembly and the NCOP in relation to oversight and accountability. But perhaps you might just like to summarize or draw attention to what you think are the most important provisions of relevance when this Commission is considering whether Parliament did or did not live up to what is required by the Constitution on the question of oversight or accountability. So the question I'm asking is, just highlight what you think are the most important parts of Annexure A.
The Constitution gives the people directly elected by the public the responsibility to be their guidance. When you become a member of the National Assembly, you take an oath to abide by the Constitution and to, as honestly and as honorably as possible, to represent the people. So it is important for us as Parliament to say that for us, it is not just a prestige, it is about service. It is not just about holding the executive to account and to play oversight over them. It is also to hear on behalf of the people and to speak on behalf of the people. It is about ensuring that both houses ensure that nothing that is in the interest of the people of South Africa is derailed, is diverted. As the two houses jointly do that work, they also join forces with the provinces and local government to make sure that no corruption, no maladministration happens. So I would say that on top of that, Parliament has the responsibility to also represent the country internationally. And that is something that is important. Parliament also passes the national budget. That is not just a function of oversight. It is a power that Parliament can use, but so far has not used effectively. To say, no, we will pass this budget because we agree 100% with it, or we will withhold this budget because we think that, in fact, you need to do that. Now, in the first few years of our democracy, we had to find enabling mechanisms, and that is why the money bills were enacted, to enable Parliament to be able to express their view on the budget and any other money bill. Sadly, we have not yet exercised that power. Hopefully, we will in future exercise that power.
Right, thank you. What do you then do, if I can take you back? I'm going to take you backwards and forwards to your affidavit and the relevant annexure. But if we can now go back to page 10. Keep your finger where it is, at annexure A, because we're going to be back there very quickly. You will see at page 10, paragraph 10.
Paragraph 10.
You say there, Annexure B provides a summary of recent committee activities related to corruption. Now, Annexure B is to be found at page 40 and following. Now, again, I don't think we have the time to go through the entire content of Annexure B that starts at page 40, but on my reading of it, it lists a series of examples of recent, and I stress that word, recent instances of portfolio committees exercising oversight in relation to corruption allegations in particular. Perhaps you'd like just to talk to this document briefly and in summary.
In dealing with this, one has to go back to how Parliament organizes itself to deal with oversight. Chair, if you look at the powers of committees, no committee actually has an excuse for not asking pointed questions, for not investigating, for not calling for witnesses, for not summoning people. That is important because committees of parliament, committees in the legislatures have the same powers. So I want to upfront say it is a pity that we had to wake up when the issues around allegations of state capture were there, because these are the powers of the committees. The House has further powers which enable members to ask questions, to call for snap debates, to call for motions, and to actually pointedly put the executive on the spot. So we point this out because after the allegations of state capture, it was important for us to begin to refocus the committees and Parliament itself into pointedly being deliberate about following up on issues. And that is what we intend to intensify before this term of Parliament finishes, because we want to say that committees do ask questions, but sometimes you need to capacitate members to ask questions which are pointed, to be able to produce evidence if the responses and the reaction they get are not there. So I would say that Parliament is, we pulled that out because when the allegations of state capture were given, came out into the public, Parliament woke up and then deliberately said to committees, you shall now look at these allegations and investigate them. And that is why you had committees that were mentioned as being related to any untoward behavior, were then pointedly going into those.
Yes. Now, I'm going to take you back. May I just follow up?
Yeah.
I'm going to take you back in a moment to the period you referred to, the period of allegations of state capture that led to the formation of this inquiry. But these particular instances, which are more recent instances, are you saying to the Commission that there has, in fact, in your judgment, been a change of attitude and practice in recent times?
I'm saying to the Commission that we actually can give a report from 1994 of a mixed bag, where there were committees which did not do their work with any fear, because remember the first 10 years, Chair, maybe to digress a bit, the focus was also on making Parliament for the first time to be more representative. The focus was to ensure that laws were passed, policies and processes were in place. And therefore, perhaps the focus of Parliament, rather than to look at scrutinizing, was in making laws, policing the laws that we are making, identifying the laws which were still disadvantaging people. So once you have made your laws, you now must make sure that you actually have the means and the personnel to execute. You begin to give your attention to who are these people who are supposed to be at the implementation phase of this, which are supposed to be integrating us as South Africa as one country. And I'm saying that perhaps the wake up was that it is no longer so important to run and make more new laws. It is more important for us to police what we have already put out there. It is more important for us to query when an executive member makes a commitment, makes a statement, to follow through whether or not what they have promised out there in public, this person has the resources to execute, this person has followed through, what are the results on the ground?
Well, I wanted to just take you back to the first answer you gave to the first question, Mr. Modise, because I don't want to forget what I want to raise. You referred to the oath of office that members of parliament take, and you referred to the Constitution. And the Constitution makes it very clear that Parliament, as I understand it, is about the people of South Africa.
That's so, Chairperson.
The oath of office requires every member of Parliament, before he or she can do any work as a member of Parliament, to take an oath and swear that they will be faithful to the Republic of South Africa. Now, I understand you to be saying, and I just want you to tell me if that's not what you intend to say. I understand you to be saying, as Parliament, as members of Parliament, the interests of the people of South Africa are paramount in our work as members of Parliament. Is that a good understanding of what you're saying?
That is exactly what I meant.
Yes.
We would not be public representatives if we do not take and prioritize the interest of the people of South Africa.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Mr. Fund?
Thank you. Can I now refer you to page 11, paragraph 12? You will see there are certain sub-paragraphs.
I keep on taking my finger off. Page 11.
Page 11. You see there a section headed Functions of Oversight,
Yes.
and this part of your submission summarizes the conception of what oversight really requires. And before we go anywhere else, can I take you to page 13, paragraph 18, all the way through to 21. We find the same is being done on the functions of accountability.
Yes.
When I read that, I immediately recognized where those paragraphs come from. Those paragraphs, I want to put to you, I want you to confirm if I'm correct, those paragraphs are taken straight out of the oversight and accountability model adopted by Parliament in or about 2009. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And Chair, that is in the supplementary bundle, the reference bundle, which should be on your desk. And that is, we don't have the black numbers on the top left, we only have the red numbers on the top right, but PO reference 01 is the beginning of the oversight and accountability model. And I think, Ms. Modise, if I'm correct, you have been given a copy of the reference bundle in which we find the oversight and accountability model. It's right at the back of that file. Well, it's not quite at the back, it's second from the back. Could you help
Pages.
it? It's PO Ref 01. Now, there has been quite a bit of evidence already led before the Commission in respect of this document, and therefore there's no need to cover the same material all over again. But in summary, is it correct that this document really expresses the considered view of Parliament when it was adopted as to how Parliament should go about its constitutional oversight and accountability responsibilities? Would you agree?
I would agree and extend it to the considered view of the legislative sector of South Africa. because Parliament did not work alone on the oversight model. It worked with the provincial legislatures.
Right. And we have already heard evidence that there are some important features of this oversight and accountability model that were proposed, that were endorsed in principle by the adoption of this model, but were in fact not implemented. For example, a tracking and monitoring mechanism, just to take one important example. And I suggested that you should be given access to the affidavit of Mr. Magashule, speaking for the African National Congress. I'm not going to take you to that, but I think you will have seen that Mr. Magashule's affidavit, which is endorsed by Mr. Mantashe, who will be testifying this evening, says, well, the ANC, for one, accepts that there are certain portions of the oversight and accountability model that were not implemented, that still should be implemented, and that the implementation of what hasn't yet been implemented has become a priority. Do you concur with that? Am I giving a fair summary?
I agree. And I'm happy that the ANC in their affidavit says that. We have actually started with that. In both houses, whether members of the executive expresses and commits to doing certain things to or for the public, we take note. Committees take note. When committees report, when ministers make statements on the floor of the House, we write to them to remind them, you have said this, please give us a progress report. What we have not finalized, which we are working on, is to then have a kind of a report at the end of each session that says, we wrote to you, Minister X, on your commitment, but you have not come back to us and said how far you have gone on that commitment, whether you have done it or you have not done it, and what the reasons are for not doing that. That, we agree, is what we are in the process of finalizing and getting the personnel to do that.
Right. And that's directly related with another feature that has been much discussed in the evidence that we've already heard on parliamentary oversight. We first really heard about it arising from the evidence of Mr. Gordy, a former chairperson of SCOPA. And his perspective was the following, that SCOPA, for one, in his view, responsibly and appropriately grappled with the problems drawn to their attention, particularly by the Auditor General's report, conducted hearings, drew reports, and in the reports highlighted features that were not regarded as satisfactory, and also highlighted what they believed should be done about it. And then, according to Mr. Gordy, those reports of SCOPA would be adopted by the National Assembly, and then the relevant portions would be conveyed through the office of the Speaker to the appropriate representative of the Executive. And Mr. Gordy's point was this: although that is done, not only is there no direct follow-up, but there is no sanction for a member of the Executive who simply doesn't do what is requested or directed by Parliament, and that some attention needs to be given to this problem of sanction, or we could put it differently, consequence management. What is to be done when Parliament does its job and the response doesn't come? Not only do you not get the report back, as you discussed, but sometimes you must reach the stage at which it becomes apparent there's no intention to do what Parliament is directing. Do you want to comment on that issue, the issue of consequences for non-compliance with the clearly expressed recommendations or proposals of Parliament when adopting portfolio committee reports?
I want to respond in two ways. Mr. Gwede was right, but he also had the powers as the chairperson of that committee to follow up not only at committee level, but in the floor of the House, to call for the minister to respond. The second leg of my response will be that the reason why we are looking at the tracking is precisely to be able to, at the end of the year, at the end of 5 years, be able to write a report card to the president and say, this is what your minister has done, promised, and not delivered on. This is how they have fared. This is how they have failed to fare. But in the meantime, in fact, the leader of government business does get whipped by the presiding officers now and then, because we as Parliament do not have the power as the presiding officers. The members can do that. They can ask any question. One of the weapons the members have on the floor of the House is to ask embarrassing questions. We used to call it the power of embarrassment, where you embarrass the executive into action. So what we have done is to, when members complain to us that we're not getting joy, we hit the leader of government business, so that the leader of government business whips the people he leads in the executive to take us seriously. But I want to make an example. When I was in the NCOP, we had a minister who was not taking us seriously, would never come to the NCOP when they had questions there. So at a particular instance, this minister was very enthusiastic because the budget was coming up. And I said to the minister, I don't think we have any appetite in dealing with your budget. You disrespect us, and therefore, you will see to finish how you get recognition and adoption of your budget. Recently, one of the ministers' budget was coming up. He was quite new. He had an engagement at the AU and thought that they could skip the budget. And I said, if you go to the AU and your budget is on the floor, I can guarantee you we will not pass the budget. Because the priority of our international responsibility cannot be so superior as to the budget of this country and the functioning and the deepening of democracy and empowerment in this country. So it is not just about having a device, a tracking device. It is also about having members of Parliament experienced enough to push their point at committee level and on the floor of the House. It is about us following through between us, the presiding officers, on those letters that we have written 3 months ago. Minister, have you? I don't see your response. You have not recommitted. You have not given us, in fact, the extent of what you have done. And that is why we are saying we want to do that tracking so that we can do this.
Yes. And when you said,
I think the topic is quite important, Ms. Modise. What should be done with regard to a member of Parliament who wants to do his or her job properly in this regard, who happens to be a member of the majority party, and but feels that if she or he does his or her job in this regard the way she would like to do it, she might be viewed by his or her colleagues, members of the same party, as behaving like the opposition. And therefore, she feels, or he feels that, no, I can't be too robust, or I can't ask an embarrassing question to my comrade who is a minister, I must remember that I'm not the opposition. What do we do about that?
Chair, I think if the member is not too sure that they will not be treated like they are not loyal to the party, they have, in the first instance, there is a chief whip that they can go to. And in fact, within every portfolio committee, there is a whip of a party, and all parties try to put somebody in there. They can take a stand there. They can approach us, the presiding officers. We have had meetings with chairpersons and ministers where tensions were rising and intervened. But I must make a personal example of myself. In those 8 years, I had a Minister of Defense. And at some point, the two of us had to be called by the President, because I insisted that I understood what my role was, and the committee insisted that we understood. And because on 2 occasions, as chair, with the support of the committee, of the Joint Standing Committee, I had actually cancelled the meeting because the minister was ill-prepared and asked the minister to leave. So sometimes when, especially when you are still new in Parliament and you are not sure, and sometimes if you really are not certain, you will be intimidated. But if you know that you are right, you can take this matter up right there in Parliament, in your party structures, and have your battles there. Because once you are in Parliament, you take the same oath. And the same oath is, where the public purse spends 10 cents, you must follow that 10 cents unafraid, impartially, ask the questions, because it is not our resources, it is the resources out there. And you will find a good size of MPs who do that. I do know that some people think it is the electoral system. The electoral system is there, but it can intimidate you. But I think that the member of Parliament, perhaps our weakness is not in strengthening the resolve of this individual member of Parliament to be unafraid, to say it is in my party, but in fact the party is here to represent the interest of the majority that has brought them here. And therefore, I am putting this question. And in some instances, you've had very stinging questions that have begun to come from the floor. In not this budget debates, I think just before we went into COVID, I remember the Portfolio Committee on Human Rights, on Human Settlements and Water, cautioning. They said, we really are not having the appetite to pass this budget because of this and this and this and this. Now, this was ANC members telling to their minister, and they said the only reason we are passing this is that we recognize that you are new in the department. So more and more over time, it means that we will be able to have members of Parliament representing the people and the people's interest. Now, one of the problems of the South African Parliament, Chair, is that every 5 years, parties bleed members.
Yes.
You've got new people coming in, uncertainty, you still have to capacitate, and in those years, you do encounter where the executive has the upper hand. But I must also say that perhaps if we were to be able to move in such a way that the third arm of the state actually unfurls and becomes an arm of the state and can really get the resources that it needs to do its job. You might not find that members, one, want to become cabinet ministers and therefore don't ask unnecessary questions. Two, they feel comfortable because the arm of states, the legislative sector, is strong enough to protect all members irrespective of party affiliation. And that is where I think into the future the South African Parliament will be doing.
It's interesting you say, you mentioned that last point, because as you were talking, what was going on in my mind is maybe there ought to be some way of addressing some of the things that might be attracting some members of parliament to the executive, because maybe some say, well, I don't want to do anything that could be career limiting. I want to be considered to be deputy minister or minister and so on and so on. Of course, it may be that some who may have that in mind, irrespective of whatever financial benefit that might come with, but just the position. But maybe if financially it doesn't make a lot of difference, it might contribute, so that people can just do their job without an eye to promotion, if it is promotion. But I obviously that can't be everybody, but I think there would be some people. But I think that what is very important is to try and create an environment for members of parliament which will encourage the robustness that we think should be there in performing oversight functions and holding the executive accountable. And it may well be that the leadership of parliament might need to think about what things need to be done or what measures need to be put in place to encourage members to do what is right, and to know that doing your job the right way shouldn't necessarily mean that it's career limiting. But certainly, if, for example, political parties or the majority party is going to be sending the message that don't behave like the opposition, then people might feel that, the opposition asks certain questions to members of the executive in a certain way. I mustn't do that. I must remember that this is my comrade, this is an ANC minister. But at the same time, one asks the question, who said that your party wants corruption to be swept under the carpet? Who said that your party wants a minister who might not be doing the right thing to address corruption in their department should not be exposed, because corruption should be dealt with properly? So these are all the things that I think we all should look at. But certainly, I think Parliament is a very important institution, but it's important that they don't allow anybody not to take them seriously. And I think that starts with doing its job properly and holding, the executive to account.
Chair, I would agree. And that is why we start every term of parliament with induction. A general induction program for all members, rules, and all the housekeeping issues. A more detailed workshop and training for chairpersons. And then we do have an ongoing relationship with the University of Witwatersrand and UJ, to try and capacitate members. But in fact, nothing beats creating a capable member than a member who really reads up on the portfolio that they have, that they are in, that do research. In my time as chairperson, I could subscribe at the expense of Parliament with any international body and magazine, and therefore I was up to date. The other thing is that, in fact, good chairpersons and good backbenchers actually make the best ministers. They understand why questions are put to them. They have no difficulties in coming clean. They know when they are not supposed to be dilly-dally. So our thrust is get enough capacity for the individual member to understand their own environment, to be able to read and analyze the budget of their portfolio, to ask pointed questions. Because ultimately, if I am sitting at home and I'm watching Parliament, I want to see this person that is supposed to be representing me asking the minister a question about what affects me, asking the minister about the quality of water I am drinking. I do not want the ANC member to be praising the minister when I don't have water. I want that matter. And that is why you've got motions, you've got questions, you've got matters in the public interest, so that as and when things develop out there, members of Parliament can take the gap and say, I want to discuss this. You have also a balancing act, because you also allow members of the executive to come to the House and say, can I make a statement? This has happened, so that information goes out there. Because one of our responsibilities also is to take the information out into the public, but not take it just and leave it. It is also to ensure that the public is properly educated on issues of oversight, on the laws that we pass, how they affect them, on any policy, on any relationship we might form with any outside body. So Parliament has also that responsibility to educate and to inform.
Thank you.
Chair, sorry to interrupt, but it's been drawn to my attention that sometimes your personal mic is not centered and that they're having some difficulty hearing your comments.
I think it might not be the mic. I think working in this commission for the past 3 years has done something to my voice.
I'm sure it has.
In the past, nobody would complain of not hearing me.
Ms. Modise, if I can just take you back a bit.
But I've adjusted it.
Yes, thank you, Chair. If I could just take you back a bit to when I last asked you a question. You started to tell the Chair about a practice of putting the leader of government business on the spot. And I just want to check as a matter of fact that when you were giving that evidence, you were talking about in your present capacity as Speaker with the present leader of government business. That's what you were referring to, or were you talking more generally?
No, it is practice. That has been there. The Deputy President is the leader of government business. The Deputy President and the presiding officers have sessions together. If there is a deadlock on certain issues on Parliament, the Chief Whip of the majority party, the Speaker, and the leader of government business are the deadlock breaking mechanism. So the leader of government business is the middle person between the executive and the legislature. So even when we deal with programs of Parliament, we have to, because we don't want to blindside them, and we don't want to blame them when they don't turn up, when we actually did not also take into consideration. So there is this ongoing two-way street between the leader of government business and the presiding officers.
All right, so I want to focus on that more clearly now. Before you were the Speaker of the National Assembly, you were in fact the chair of the NCOP. So although you were new to this job, relatively new to this job, you've actually been part of the executive authority and therefore would have participated in the sort of discussions with the leader of government business for at least the last 2 terms of Parliament. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correctly.
And of course, the leader of government business is traditionally, and at the moment and in the preceding administration, the deputy president of the country, so that it's the current deputy president and the former deputy president, now the president, Cyril Ramaphosa. And are you telling the Commission that in the period when you were the chair of the NCOP and when Ms. Mbete was the Speaker of the National Assembly, you would have attended from time to time discussions between the executive authority of Parliament and the then Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa?
I am saying that. I am also saying, as chairperson of the NCOP, I have had to sit down with the then leader of government business on ministers who did not think it was important to attend to the sittings of the NCOP on the quality of responses on questions put to them. And we saw an improvement after taking that matter up with the leader of government business.
Thank you. Now, you will be aware, I'm sure, that there's been quite a lot of evidence before this Commission on the manner in which parliamentary oversight was exercised, particularly in the National Assembly more than in the NCOP. But over the period, particularly 2016, 2017, and there has been a point of view of some that Parliament did not, particularly in 2016 and up to the middle of 2017, really get to grips with and pursue and exercise proper oversight in relation to allegations that were then widespread in the public domain on questions of alleged state capture, alleged corruption. Can you tell us whether those sorts of issues were raised in the sort of process that you've described, the consultation between the executive authority and the leader of government business?
I would not specifically respond directly to that one. That would have had to be a discussion between the Speaker of the National Assembly and them, because remember also that the executive members are not members of the NCOP, and therefore the NCOP can only deal with them on the occasions they are in the NCOP and the rules of the NCOP applied for them. Now, when they are members of the National Assembly, it makes it better a sense of responsibility on the Speaker, because these are your members. They will have to come here for vote, they will have to come here for debates, they occasionally go to that house. So it would, in my own submission, this is one question which I suspect Mbete will be better placed to respond.
Well, that's precisely what I was trying to understand. So if we want to know about that, then really the people we have to ask are Ms. Mbete and President Ramaphosa, because it would have been a personal interaction between the two of them. Is that am I understanding your
Yes, your understanding is correct through you, Chair. I would say that yes, that matter would have come up, but when you also look into what we gave you, you will notice that there was a swing, a change, especially after the judgment at the Constitutional Court, where the National Assembly realized that it was their responsibility, especially in that instance, because I keep on saying that any structure that is under the control of the executive becomes Parliament's business. So Parliament would need to understand its role, and when it is not clear of its role, we do have a legal department, and when we are not, they know. When I'm not happy with the legal advice they give me, I force them to get outside help so that I can have a comparison. So when you are presiding, sometimes you pause to look at whether or not the direction you are taking or you are being made to take is right. Because ultimately, it is on the head of the presiding officer how matters get deliberated on, how they are concluded. If you're not careful, you will let the thing flow and take the blame. Because ultimately, whatever it is that happens on the floor, if a decision is taken that unpalatable, it is adopted by the House, it is my responsibility. I must make sure that I follow through with that. It becomes my bet, whatever. So if we do not create enough capacity to enable members to make distinctions, to enable members sometimes to say, I'd rather be slow on this matter and get more information and empower myself to take the right decision, then it won't be right with Parliament. If we get put under pressure, especially towards the end of a term, to run because then we have a lot of issues, I think that is the time when shortcuts are taken and which could be very pricey. But I think that Parliament must always argue to take a slowly but sure path, to insist that it is properly advised so that it can take the decision that do not just benefit Parliament, because we do get benefited if the public is happy. But in fact, if the public is unhappy, we are the Sonderbox.
I'd just like to take you back.
I just wanted to say, although he's asking the questions, you are telling me, so if you could face this side more often.
Yes,
more often. You have been doing less of it, so sometimes I don't hear well, so...
My apologies, Chair.
Okay, no, that's all right.
Ms. Modise, in your last answer, you referred to a constitutional court judgment, and I got the impression that what you were conveying was that judgment had been catalytic in assisting a better understanding of the role of Parliament. Was that a reference to the Nkandla judgment or some other judgment?
I think yes, it is. Because, Chairperson, before that judgment, if you read into what happened in the National Assembly, I suspect that National Assembly looked at its powers and functions and decided that, in fact, it is within its own right to review and to take whatever a course of action they want to take. But that decision of the court helped us because subsequent to that decision, I myself, as Speaker of the National Assembly, have not been happy about what has come out. I have rushed to the court to say, look, I think there is overreach here, or I think I don't understand this, please clarify this. So that decision of the court has actually empowered Parliament to begin to do things properly, to respect the space of the Chapter 9 institutions, to respect the courts, but also to insist that it understands its mandate better and must execute.
Chair, I'm about to move on to a different topic. I see is this the convenient time to take the break?
Okay, let's take the tea adjournment, just 11:15. We'll resume at 11:30. We adjourn.